You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change. Now hopefully all of you who listened to the last episode on Parenting 101 found it inspiring, helpful, thought-provoking, but most of all, in a way, useful. And one of the things that I said was that I was going to take that podcast and dive a little deeper into it because I think it's very, very worthwhile focusing on this. And my intention is to do something similar when it comes to relationships, i.e. marriages or partnerships. So in this particular episode, which I quaintly called Parenting 102, I want to talk about another framework in which to think about how we tend to parent. And I think it's a really effective one. It's very useful, and it builds on what I said in the last session. So this is especially about the idea of disciplining a child, okay? And so when we talk about parenting styles, we fundamentally talk about three styles of parenting. So I'm going to go from the loosest to the most rigid, and that is we talk about permissive parenting and aggressive parenting on the far outer end of that sort of spectrum or pendulum, actually. And what we're looking to do in terms of effectiveness is head towards the center, which is about being assertive. Okay, now some people talk about permissive as being laissez-faire. And so what's the difference between these three parenting styles? Well, firstly, it's the amount and kind of structure that the family has in place and the kind of discipline it imposes on its members, talking about children. Now, as I said, this is a bit like a pendulum, and that is that these approaches exist on an arc. And it's organised from the loosest organisation to the most rigid. And to be realistic, fundamentally most families, most parents parent in a blend of all those three stages. Okay, so let me dive a little bit deeper. What are we talking about? So let me talk about the sort of permissive style, the loosest style. And in this particular parenting style, there's a number of things that I see that don't make it very, very useful. So imagine you've got, your 7 or 8 year old, and the kid's messy. Most kids are messy. Most kids are opportunistic. They sort of take things as they come. They're not really heavily into structure and organising. That's stuff that they need to learn, especially around 7 and 8. And so in the permissive parenting style, I'm going to be sort of loose and fluffy. There's stuff all over the place. I guess you must have been, tied up with what you were doing. And, in order to get it out of the way, I'll do it for you. Now, that can come out in all sorts of different ways. And in particular, in a lot of permissive parenting families, that I'll do it for you comes at a peak of desperation. So what are we seeing here? Well, the style is quite nurturing. It's sort of, caring and loving, but there's not enough structure in this. And firstly and foremost, the child actually doesn't get to respond to what the parent is actually looking for the child to do. And so there's no accountability. There's no responsibility that's brought into place. So if you want to check out your own parenting style and you're a little bit concerned about, that you might just fit into this, let me give you a couple pointers. Firstly, you may have expectations that are completely inconsistent with either the child's development or age. And it's inconsistent across situations, okay? And in that style, the child is able to basically dodge any form of discipline. And if there is discipline, it's often out of context. It's either too little or too much. One of the things that we also do in that context as a parent is I get flustered a lot. Or sometimes I pretend to be flustered, thinking that that's going to get the child going. Lesson number one here is no matter how much you act or are flustered, the kid's going to ignore it. The other thing is in your communication style, you are unclear and or indirect. So in other words, you don't spend enough time making the communication succinct for that child to pick up on what the core issue is. The other part of it is, do you often feel like you're a bit of a martyr or a victim in the relationship with your child? Are you worrying about being liked by your child? I mean, one of the big lessons in parenting is that if you're expecting to be happy in your relationship with your child all the time, you've got a reality check coming, because no matter how good you are as a parent, that isn't going to happen. Also, no matter how good your child is, it's not going to happen. Okay? So there's a couple of serious consequences in using a permissive parenting style. Firstly, kid gets zero respect for you because you're actually not respecting yourself and your boundaries in your relationship with that child. As I've already mentioned, the kid doesn't learn any accountability for their behaviour. They're not expected to be responsible. There's also no limits in this exchange. And the other part of it, and this is often, it's an interesting concept because a lot of times we shirk away from the idea of power. But in parenting, the position of power is actually quite important. And it's not just about power, it's about being empowered as well. And a lot of kids in a permissive parenting household just have too much power about, what's going on. Power, for example, about when a couple has separated, about whether the separated parents can see somebody else. A 10-year-old should not determine whether you've started dating or not. Now, there's another fundamentally podcast involved in this because there's some, rules of thumb around that, which I talk to a lot of fathers about in how to do that effectively without actually creating a great deal of, insecurity in your child. But that's for another time. Is also not the child, she is also not really getting the message about the responsibility about daily chores. Okay, everybody in a family, which is a team fundamentally, has areas of accountability and responsibility. Now, part of that falls under the heading of cooperation. And the sooner we teach children to be cooperative, the better. Okay, so let me swing to the other side and let me talk about the aggressive or authoritarian parenting style. Now, this part of parenting has just got too much structure, too much power on the side of the parent. And, when I say too much power, it's the sort of power that comes from instilling fear in the child, all of which will ultimately have a significant emotional consequence on your child, and essentially negative consequences. Okay, so this is a family where I often see a lot of kids who are highly, highly anxious. In the permissive family, in the permissive parenting style family, The child is still anxious, but not necessarily in the same way. And so one of the things that you're going to get in the authoritarian style of parenting is that you're going to be playing rope-a-dope, like I said in the last session, and that is the child learns to fight back. So you're going to be embedded in a whole range of power struggles. One of the other things that comes along is with this particular style is an exaggerated level of criticism. So things like accusing the kid that they've got bad intentions, that they're bad, evil, whatever it is. And a lot of parents at the time, when it comes out of their mouth, later on go, "Oh, I should have said that. That's really bad." Now, the further you are embedded in being an authoritarian, the less likely you are going to feel bad about how you've managed your child, because you're going to rationalise it. You're going to have a cognitive bias that I need to do this in order to create a child that's going to fit into society and that is going to be successful. Well, they might be successful, but they're also going to be highly emotionally conflicted. And they're going to be either anxious or avoidant in their relationship with you. Another part of this is never giving credit to your child's ideas or thoughts. Now, sometimes we've got to bite the bullet and go, well, in my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is not a good idea, but I'm not necessarily going to say that to the child directly, i.e., I think your idea sucks. What I'm going to say to the child is, well, have you really thought that through? What might be some of the consequences in that idea? How did you come to that conclusion? So we're using a little bit of Socratic dialogue when we're trying to offset the aggressive style. The other one that's a biggie in the authoritarian or aggressive parenting style is doling out harsh disciplines, stuff that's way beyond what the actual offence is worth. Also, not explaining to the child what the real expectations are here, and just having too many rules and strict ones. I worked once with a woman who was 20, and she had never been allowed to date. She had never been out on her own without, the strictest guidelines about where she could go, who she could go with, and so on. Now, she had very deliberately gotten herself a job that led to her being completely independent in a very short period of time. And the parents thought that she must be mentally ill. Now, I'm not exaggerating, this is exactly what went down the line. Now, some cultures are more susceptible to this than others. Okay. What are the results of this particular parenting style? Well, obviously self-esteem is going to be a real issue for the kid because they don't necessarily get a chance to test themselves. They certainly don't feel understood or supported. And any form of attachment between parent and child are weakened and, in fact, are probably traumatic. So who's that child going to turn to if there's some challenges and some difficulties? So one of the things that we see in family therapy and in research and in counselling is that children from these families are often either overtly or overly submissive or they're seriously rebellious. And so as a therapist, one of the things that I do is I gauge what the potential parenting style might be through the behaviour of the child. Okay, let's go to the middle path. Let's talk about the assertive style, the authoritative style of parenting. So let me go back to the 8-year-old who's left everything lying around throughout the house, and I've asked that child to pick it up. So I might go, look, you still haven't put away all those things I asked you to do. And it bothers me that I can't count on you to take care of your things, and I can't, really let you off with not learning how to do that. I'd be doing you a disservice as a dad or as a mum. So one of the things that you and I are going to do is we're going to work out a time and a place for you to put these things away. And so until you and I have got that together, I'm going to put in some consequences about that. Now, I'll leave that open because quite often I might just go, look, you can't watch your favourite show, or, you won't be able to get, part of your pocket money, because part of the pocket money might be about, participating and cooperating within in the family. So in that approach, one of the things I am going to be open to is to listen and yet at the same time hold tight onto the position that I take. And the child either overtly or covertly will learn that there are certain limits that are not negotiable. One of the things that I do constantly see is parents who give in to the incessant demands of a child's desires. So, what would you like for dinner? Charles goes, I don't know. Well, how about I make chicken? No, don't like chicken. Hate chicken. Oh, okay. Well, what about some eggs and some toast? No, don't like eggs, don't like toast. And so, the parent suddenly finds them in this quicksand. It doesn't matter what they put on, and put up for dinner. It just gets shot down. Now, there's a permutation on this which is even worse, and that is when you've cooked something for the child, you put it on the table, kid turns its nose up on what's on the table. Dad goes, well, what would you like? Oh, I wouldn't mind a chicken sandwich. Dad goes off, makes a chicken sandwich, and the kid goes, no, I don't like that either. One of the things that I often sort of talk about is you don't negotiate with tiny terrorists. You give them two choices, if that. And in the kitchen, fundamentally, one of the things that's really, really helpful is this is what's on the menu. Now, as an assertive parent, I'm going to know what's really going to get up the kid's nose and what are they more likely to eat. And I'm not going to try to force them into eating something that they completely and utterly detest. I still don't like celery. End of story. No matter how much you coat it in dressing or what, I can sniff it a mile away and I don't like it, and I generally try and avoid it. Sometimes being polite means I'm going to sort of eat around it, but I very rarely actually eat the celery. So I give the same respect to my kid. The other thing that's particularly good, and these are clues that you're using assertive parenting styles, is you're persistent. Remember what I said, it's about persistence. And you stick to that until your requests are followed. You're also going to be using open communication with the child, so you're going to listen and empathise with the child. And rather than giving lectures, you're going to give brief reasons. And you're going to refuse as well when there's something that's not reasonable or inappropriate in the moment. I'm also going to give the child feedback about what I'm feeling. Right? So, when they do something and I get upset, I can say to the child, look, when you did this, this is how I felt because. Okay, it's not just, bah, and the child's got to guess what you're feeling or why you might be angry or upset. The other consequence in this context, in this parent-child dynamics, is the child clearly understands that you are the parent, you're the adult in charge. And in that context, I don't blame my kid for anything, really, other than I help them to become responsible and to take ownership. And in this instance, I'm also going to start to establish rules that are flexible according to their age. So when you're 15, you don't need to go to bed at 7:30. I often find that a lot of parents struggle with adapting rules. Now, this gets tricky if you've got two, three, or four children or more, right? Because there's always, the oldest one has certain, flexibilities, and the next one down wants to fit in with those, and then it goes down the line. So suddenly you find that in order to keep this reasonable, the oldest child's still going to bed early, whilst the youngest one is sort of just maybe running a free-for-all line. So part of being the oldest member of the siblings is I get certain privileges that are according to my age. I mean, once I get my L plates, that doesn't mean my 15-year-old brother can take my L plates and go for a drive with mum and dad. It's just not reasonable. So this is really, really important, and some of the really top results out of using an assertive or an authoritative parent style is that we've got a healthy balance of nurturing the child and structure, and we're communicating to that child that they're lovable, but sometimes their behaviour is out of line. I need to be critical of the behaviour, not them. The other thing I want to focus on in that context is that I want to give my kid the message that they're capable. I don't buy I can't do it. Well, let's see. Let's give it a try. And all of this builds a strong parent-child relationship wherein the child feels secure and safe and will come to you for support rather than shutting you down. All right, so a bit of a challenge until next time. Just check out where you think you might fall. And as always, if you want to get in touch with me, please do. My contact details available. I'm available also for coaching and counselling. And if you're in my vicinity, we could negotiate even going into therapy. So those details can be found on my contacts on the internet and through my business manager, Rebecca, who is available if you're in Sydney on 02 9999 0429. Until next time, this is me signing off.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda at noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.